Appamada's programs and facilities are supported through your generosity. Your support really does make a huge difference. You'll find a link for contributions on the website at appamada.org/contribute. Thank you so much.
Good morning.
Good morning, Tate.
It's really great to see everyone. So I'd originally planned to share with you the next section of the book project. But Flint told me that some people were not happy with that idea and would prefer a Dharma talk instead. So today I want to speak directly from the heart and from my own experience. I guess this talk might be titled From Loss to Empowerment. As the gifted young poet Elizabeth Alexander wrote, perhaps tragedies are only tragedies in the presence of love, which confers meaning to loss. Individually and as a Sangha, we've suffered many losses over the past few years. Some of us have lost parents, children, loved ones, and that ache never goes away. The Sangha has faced the shattering of presence together during the pandemic, the aging and moves of its senior teachers, and even some dear Sangha members. The collective global community of all beings suffers too, with political division, environmental catastrophe, and a worldwide epidemic of loneliness, dread, and despair. We are seeing the horrifying consequences and most extreme examples of precisely the poisons the Buddha warned about: greed, hatred, and ignorance. We need to acknowledge our grief and mourn our losses together. And we also recognize the losses still unfolding and those that lie ahead. These are the heavy burdens weighing on our hearts. To face them alone is almost unbearable. So what do we do? What's your strategy? Shopping? Work? Keeping busy, very busy? Drinking? Binge watching TV shows? How do we numb the pain of what we do not want to feel, even if it costs us our own precious life? Meanwhile, our grief must go underground so that it doesn't consume us, so that we can function, so that we can get along with others. And all this can only expand our sense of being alone in the world. I can hardly express the profound grief I felt about moving away from Austin, from my home and all it's meant over the years, from the daily lived activity of our Sangha and each of you. It was a wild grief, not a quiet pool of sadness. It was a devastating, crushing loss of a beloved world and my secure place in it, among some of my dearest relationships. But in any event, suddenly you were all gone, blown out of my life by the pandemic. It was kind of crazy to immediately put all of our programming on Zoom, but back then we thought it would be a temporary accommodation, that we would soon be able to return to normal. There was no way to envision how long we would be isolated from each other, how long it would be before we could sit in the Zendo together, in the profound, silent companionship of Zazen, or meet face to face for a chat on the porch, a ceremony for tacos at Cherrywood on a Friday morning. We'd almost forgotten how to be together and why to be together as a Sangha. And this part is hard to say. Meanwhile, day after day, I too was all alone, far from my beloved family, and struggling to support and encourage the Sangha. Day after day, I was performing Zen in an empty Zendo in front of a camera. I was writing Dharma talks given to an empty room and a screen full of tiny squares where you now lived, and sharing reflections via email. Our practice of relational Zen was suddenly and dramatically disrupted. I had never aspired to be a film star as a kid. I've always shied away from the camera, and there I was every single day, struggling to be present and foster our community, its bonds of connection and care, to somehow, week after week and month after month, bring cheer and encouragement, some sense of a common path, some vision of our shared future as a community. I was in online Zazen, online classes, online meetings, with students, with councils, with Flint, with teachers, with the board, with intensives 8 and often over 12 hours a day. During that time, I did my absolute best for you until I was utterly depleted. I literally hit a wall. As I said to Flint, I hit a wall not like a runner hits a wall and runs through it, but like a bird hits a window. I was so fortunate to have morning walks with Dennis and Stephanie and Martha. I got a puppy, a little being who was a welcome distraction, but I was overwhelmed and exhausted. My sister worried about me, and as the pandemic dragged on with no end in sight, she urged me to move closer to family. It was inconceivable at first. Appamada has been my life since the earliest days of Live Oak Sangha in 1995. I once told Margaret Keyes, there is no me apart from Appamada. But as I felt myself actually breaking down inside, I realized I could not go on in this way. You all remember vividly how it was. People hoarding toilet paper, disinfecting their groceries, viewing each other with fear of contagion, without even casual social contact, at the movies, in school, at work, in restaurants, in stores, parties, or just walking on the street. I don't think this loss has been properly acknowledged and mourned together. We prefer to forget, and we struggle to return to what we think of as normal. But there is no return to normal. I can't, for example, return and simply resume my former role there. Leaving Austin in the midst of the pandemic was brutal, even though necessary. There was no ceremony of farewell together, no reception, no opportunity to say personal goodbyes. There was no one to help as I packed my belongings from 24 years of living in my beloved home, from 2 different houses, box by box, trying to separate what I would need and leave what Appamada might need. Thousands of tiny decisions made alone. On the last day, Joan came to help me, brave and kind as always. And Glenn Coleman generously offered to follow me to my sister's house. That was a long, strange trip. I was officially homeless and spiritually bereft. Worse yet, I no longer knew who I was. So there's that. Fortunately, and by some astounding synchronicity, Flint and I had entrusted 3 fine Dharma teachers, Lori, Joel, and Todd, in January. We are so blessed to have their presence and care. In less than a year, they were thrown into the fire by my move. And look how they've blossomed as teachers devoted to the Sangha, even in the midst of such challenging times. They've never wavered in their care for you. I have the utmost gratitude and appreciation for their steadfast commitment, depth of practice, knowledge of the Dharma, and skill. This is an extraordinary community, and it has grown through the challenges we've faced. Yet I hear the rumblings of discontent, dissatisfaction, and confusion. I think we can be a bit lazy, too, expecting others to do what we can only do for ourselves. Flint and I are not parents, and you do not need some other magical being, a priest or some outside teacher, to come into the Sangha and tell you what to do, how to be. You are on a spiritual path with good companions, spiritual friends, and with good guides and the teachers we've trained and entrusted to you. The real question is, What will you make together out of the teachings we've left you? Wisdom, compassion, ethical conduct according to the precepts, connection, mutual care, and vow. This is your legacy. Do not squander it in petty disputes or false nostalgia for the past. We must forge right now the causes and conditions for the future we want to inhabit, and we must do it together. What I can do, what I am doing, is to provide an account, not only from my own perspective, but from yours as well, of Appamada's history and guiding principles. This is something I feel is necessary, not only for the Sangha, but for myself. Possibly, I'll be the only person interested in it. But even so, I'm compelled to write it. I'm a writer, and writing is how I make sense of the world, how I find my place in it. I've invited the Sangha to share in this project so that other voices, other views can enrich it. But ultimately, it's my responsibility, and that is what I'm devoted to right now. So I'm not as present, not as visible, because writing requires a great deal of space and time. And in much of it, nothing is happening except the underground process that somehow turns into words on the page. So it's your turn to support the Sangha, to appreciate our teachers, to study the Dharma more deeply, and to practice wholeheartedly with sincerity. Don't fuss, don't quarrel with each other, don't disparage the Sangha, because that is not our way. Look for meaningful ways to make a real contribution to the well-being of this remarkable Sangha and its terrific, good-hearted, selfless leaders. If you're not actively making things better, actively creating harmony, actively cherishing our precious opportunity here, you're actually making things worse for everyone. We practice Zazen, as we've said many times, to stop making things worse. So let's bring into being, moment by moment, day by day, the world we want to inhabit together. Okay, that's actually all I want to say, but there's plenty of time for questions if you like, and I'm happy to even do this in a kind of inquiry style if you like. So we'll see what the monitors think.
Yeah, if people would like to raise the hand, if they have a question or would like to talk with you, then please do. And I'll put them next to you. I think, Joan, have you just sat by the computer, Joan, to talk with Peg?
I just want to say how wonderful it is to be with you today and to hear this Dharma talk, to hear you speaking from your heart as I've heard you speak so many times. And I've missed it. And yet you give such wisdom. We have wonderful and trusted teachers who are doing such a great job. And I think it was last week that Elizabeth Shue came forward and said, you know, she wasn't here when our senior teachers were. She's come afterwards and she hears all this feeling of loss and she doesn't have it. She finds our teachers magnificent. And this Sangha has always been so rich with teaching. And of course, we love our senior teachers, but our entrusted teachers have come forward so beautifully. And it's such a wonderful, wonderful community. It offers so much to Austin and to the world. And I'm just so happy that the world has this. Thank you for being with us today,
Joan, thank you for helping me pack up.
We have Joel next.
How good to see you, Joel.
Thank you, Peg. And thank you for this talk. I want to ask a question, knowing it speaks to the points that you're raising, I think. And knowing that you have lots of experience thinking about systems as well, which has informed your teachings over the years. And that is something that I talk about, I think, every day in a conversation with somebody at Appamada. The problem of what I'm probably using the term incorrectly, but asynchronous communication. That we have communications, we have conversations. In my own case, I have a conversation with one person, and then I think that's covered it. I've talked to everybody in the world. Everybody knows about it. Everybody knows how I think.
Yeah.
And like that. But in fact, often it comes as a big surprise, to others and who are not hearing. And how can, just in systems terms, is there some way to improve our communication within our Sangha so that, there's a nice turnout here. There's 38 participants showing online, and of course, many more counting the folks in the Zendo, but of the whole community, that's a small part. How can we improve so that what we share actually does get shared?
I think that's such a great question, especially in such a district system, and we, because we're quite networked together, we have the impression that if we tell one person or say it one time, that's enough. But in truth, even the Buddha saw he had to keep repeating the same teachings over and over and over again. In different places, different people show up. Even the people who've heard it before forget. And so I think we underestimate the need for this continuity of expression, right? So we think if we've said it once, we've said it. And I think about this in terms of the things that we've taught, for example, Hakomi or internal family systems, or any of the things that we've taught in the past need to be taught again. Right use of power, all those need to be taught again. Not because, we failed somehow in our initial teaching, but for all of those reasons, because it needs to be refreshed in the mind of the Sangha. So telling one person isn't necessarily infusing the mind of the Sangha, right? So this is partly why Dharma talks are necessary, intensives are necessary, classes are necessary, because they serve the function of helping us recall who we are and discover who we are. But I think that this is a very definitely an issue especially in distributed systems, but that's really why we need these communication channels, and we need to make use of them. And I think it's very challenging. And especially now because there's so many competing distractions, and it's hard for people to maintain a focus. So, the next minute they're buying something online, or, chatting with someone on messages, or, there's a way in which we diffuse our attention, and we're not attending in the same way as we once would have. I don't think, even to teachers, I don't think there's that, there's a kind of a sense of sort of a do-it-yourself mentality. Well, I read books, and, I do some of the things in the books, and I talk to some teachers, and, there's kind of this diffusion of attention and focus on one's spiritual path. And I think it's problematic in the same way that, like eating junk food in the car and missing meals is problematic for your body, right? This is problematic for your spiritual life. When you don't take it seriously, for one thing, and when you are not able to focus. And this is a function of Zazen, of course, and the function of the kinds of talks that we're doing. But, we're up against a whole world of social media and entertainment that are like a drug, basically, a trance that people fall into. So I think it's very challenging. But it's not just challenging for the Sangha. I think it's challenging for everybody, everywhere. But it's challenging in the workplace. It's challenging in families. It's challenging everywhere. So I can recommend a really good book, Stand Out of Our Light, which is about this very issue. So I think the only thing we can do frankly, is keep repeating the message. We care about each other. We're going to continue to care about each other. We care about our spiritual development. We care about each other's well-being, general well-being, and we need that because we need to pry ourselves away from the screens, which are consuming so much of our lives, some of the time. So anyway, yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, Peg. I want to say something too. I've recently been focusing on some koans that I read, and I've talked about this with you in other times, and I gave a talk about it recently, and now my watch has decided to chime in. But it is the Baizhang saying to 3 of his senior students, without lips, tongue, or throat, how will you teach? And they give various answers, and the story is very ambiguous as to what happens next. What I think is the big shift for our Sangha is that you used to teach by your presence, by turning your house over to the Zendo. As Todd said so beautifully one time after an intensive, it's like, who does that? Who do you know that has done what Peg has done here? And I just want to acknowledge that is the greatest loss for us among the Sangha, is we don't have that wordless teaching in that same way. We still have some connection with you, but it's not physically present to all of us in the way that it was before, who were able to be there with you before. Now we have to find a different way.
Yes, we have to find a different way. Yeah. And we have to recognize that embodied presence is what we offer each other.
Mm-hmm.
You, Joel, Lori, Todd, even when you're online, you're an embodied presence, right? It is different being in the environment together, in the same environment. As anyone who's been in love with someone will tell you about the difference between being in love on Zoom and being in love in the same place, right? Mm-hmm. So we're kind of in love with each other. That's what we're doing.
Yeah. Well, indeed, just to add on to that, I mean, Maria is our monitor today. Mm-hmm. We count on her. Yeah. She's teaching through her persistence and her generosity of her time. Kim, Nate, I see online, and all the others who show up over and over again. That is a teaching beyond words.
Yes, that is a teaching beyond words. And that actually is what Flint and I hope we convey. Not just represent, right? But convey. We've conveyed it to you, to Lori, to Todd, to the Sangha in general, to the councils, to the board. Hopefully, if we haven't, we've failed somehow as teachers. We've just failed.
Well, you've not failed to the extent that all these wonderful people are giving their time and their energy and doing their very best.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
As you were saying before, now we have to reorganize, and we can't wait for magical stuff to happen, except that something magical has happened with some people who are willing to do this thing. So yeah. I'm so heartened. Like you were saying, I am heartened by their example.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Joel. And thank you for everything you're doing for the Sangha, which is immense.
We have Lisa next.
Hello, Lisa.
So good morning, Peg. Good morning, Sangha. And Peg, I am so deeply moved by your self-revelation, your vulnerability, your experience of your own loss. Because often I I think that, like you said, you are so involved with the Sangha and teaching in other ways. I mean, to share in this way is a huge embodied teaching. And it's not something you often do at this level or give this amount of time to, because I think, you know, you want to be strong for us. You want to be wise. You want to always be available. And one way of being available is to let us know what you went through.
Mm.
And, you know, you indicated at times there were struggles. And the shock of your move, the loss, the timing of it, you know, I only know from the outside because I wasn't in Austin when you moved. And you really never expressed it at this deep level at the time because, I mean, it was happening right then. You know, you were in the middle of it. It's like not something you would say, you couldn't know. So that loss has kept, it was a truly embodied loss that you really couldn't experience until, as you said, you were physically removed from Alpha Mater. You were no longer in the room. Even it was a different level beyond COVID.
Mm.
And you know, COVID, it was influenced by COVID, but there was a new choice involved and a new opening. And I was very glad for you to be with your family. I mean, it's like too many feelings, right? Too much. I was so glad for you to be with your family, to make that choice, because I knew you were there in the Sangha with, it's before Juso, I think. It was you. And no matter how brave and wise you are, you know, you're still human, Peg. You're still human, Peg. And so you acknowledge that piece. And I want to say also that as someone who has been away from the Sangha for 7 years and the interruption of COVID, it's like, I don't always know about, you know, concerns and rumblings and the challenges of the leaders and teachers, because, you know, I'm so grateful. I was so grateful that I could go back. I'm grateful for COVID, grateful to be able to participate again at this level. And, you know, from the bottom of my heart, I want to do everything I can to help us prosper and flourish. So thank you to everyone for sharing.
Thank you, Lisa.
And we have Eric.
Hey, how good to see you, Eric.
I was thinking the same thing. How good to see you. I saw your face and just wanted to jump on here and express my gratitude as well. Joel and Lisa express already most of what I was feeling, but yeah, that is a very rich reflection there with your move, and very similar to Lisa. I think I had kind of already taken a little hiatus from Appamada before COVID, and then when COVID hit and health concerns, not being a very digital person, you know, never really even though I majored in radio and television, didn't want to be a TV star as well. I can relate to that. I kind of withdrew, and so to hear your reflection of your bereavement and the challenges that you sat with and stuck with and the reasons behind all of that it's yeah, I mean, I was tearing up hearing your side of the story, and just immense gratitude. Not that I didn't already have immense gratitude for you, but it was a pleasure working with you when you were at Appamada, and it's great to see your face, and I'm glad that you're putting pen to paper and documenting the history here, because I think it's funny. I've been working with the Florida Historical Society, living in Florida now, and kind of diving into some of the deeper, complex, challenging, difficult history of Florida and the South. And we had a weekend shoot in Palatka, so there was a lot of very difficult history there that we were unpacking. And it's an important process to look at those things and to reflect upon. And you're a fantastic, wonderful being for doing it. So anyway, my heart goes out to you. Thank you. It's so good to see your face, and just glad to see you. Glad to be here.
Thank you, Eric. Oh, thank you.
We have Nate.
Nate,
Hi there.
carry the heavy weight of the Sangha on your board shoulders.
We're doing fine. Thank you for reminding us of this interesting experience that we've all lived through. I think sometimes I realize how much I'm losing the forest through the trees, the tree I'm staring at right in front of me in particular. I guess my question comes from one of your teachings to me many years ago through appreciative inquiry, which is that 3 wishes question that we often ask, so that's kind of what I'm curious about. And maybe there aren't 3, but if you're looking at the Sangha now, what would be your wishes for us in this moment going forward?
I wish the Sangha would strongly support its wonderful teachers. I wish they would be able to appreciate what's offered rather than complain about what can't be offered. And I wish they would understand how important it is to really allow themselves to fulfill their spiritual destiny in a way. So both individually and together. So Sangha is an important light in the world. And sometimes I think people forget that, they get tied up in their personal concerns and even their personal spiritual path. And they don't realize what it means in a community to have something like Appamada. So I guess my wish would be for people to allow themselves to have the full richness of their spiritual experience, both individually and together.
That last one really resonates. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Nate, for everything you're doing.
We have Rosemary.
Hello, Peg, and
Marie?
it's great to see you. And I'm so glad that you changed your talk. I would have loved to hear what's going on with the 2nd chapter, but this was from the heart and really loss is something else. And so when you left, I realized, I was thinking about how it was clear to me, it must have been maybe 6 months after I started my practice, and how much you did and how industrious you were. And as the months and years have gone by, I could see, this is how I'm interpreting it, that the councils and those of us who volunteer, where it's like, how can we do everything in the gap that was left by you? And so we're exploring something about work practice, and bringing that to the wider community, because this group cannot sustain everything that needs to be done. This is my thought. And I'm curious what you think about that idea of having a place for people to go and learn about work as a practice.
I think that's a great idea. Yeah, I think it could be a short intensive, for example. It could be, there are any number of ways that can be conveyed. In most temples, they have a period of work practice after Zazen. And that's something we could implement, so, and for a while we were we were actually implementing that, but of course the pandemic sort of blasted most of our regular activities. So yeah, the care of the space and the care of each other, I think, are really serious, important responsibilities of the whole Sangha. Yeah. So I think your idea is a great one.
To spread the opportunity for people to experience it.
Yeah, like we occasionally have a Sangha work day. And one of the things you can think about is what would that mean for the online folks to have a work day, maybe together, to think about ways to come together and talk about the improvement of the online experience, for example. So yeah, but that's very important. And and work is a constant in every Zen environment. At the monastery, we spent 8 hours a day working, just working, not, sitting in meditation. We were actually working. So, and it was some of the most delightful time we had. So yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you for that support. Great to see you. Thank you so much.
See you.
And we have Chris.
Mm-hmm.
There we go.
Good morning.
It's very good to see you, Peg. Thank you for those thoughts on the work day. And thank you too, Rosemary. That's really those are working in here. Peg, say something so you're on my screen.
Oh,
there you go.
I'm not on your screen.
There you go. No, it switched to Rosemary.
Oh.
I just, I like to look at you. That's what Zoom does. COVID and the changes that came from it have been a giant practice edge for me. I did not know how much I needed the embodied presence of Sangha. I did not know how much I had taken Sangha for granted. That was wrenching for me, and it still wrenches me. I've begun to take in that this is a new phase. This is a new way of practice. I don't want that to be so, and there's a practice edge. I keep thinking we're a diaspora now, like the Jewish diaspora, the African diaspora, so many more people scattered to the winds.
They're all Dharma seeds.
Yes, they are.
It's always been that way, actually, from the beginning of Buddhism. The disciples went out and taught. They came back together during the rainy season, some of them. But certainly the ones who were in China, the ones who had traveled to Sri Lanka, and yeah, spreading the Dharma.
Another thing that came out of it for me is realizing that I need to step up more as a Sangha participant and as a leader. And that's hard for me to do. After inquiry was the heart of Appamada for me, and we still have inquiry, but it's not together in the Zendo. And after that, morning Zazen is the important thing for me. And I can rarely get to the Zendo. I'm not a morning person, and other things get in the way. And so I do join by Zoom, and it isn't the same. Which is a little ironic. since Kim and I and Vaughn, who is or was out in
Alpine.
Alpine, yeah, experimented with that for about 6 months before we all had to go to Zoom. And so there I was, one of the pioneers, and I feel like I'm, and I'm so badly hit by it. So I am stepping forward within my limits, and Seeds of Zen, I'm doing that as well as a minister now. So I am a Christian minister. I can't, I am not a Zen teacher, but that's completely there in everything that I do. So I have such a stronger sense of the importance of Sangha, even as I grieve what was. And there is not a day that goes by without my remembering and enacting gratitude for what you and Flint have created. I can't imagine life without Appamada now, and I don't want to, and Buddha willing, I won't have to. Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you for that generous expression, Chris.
And we have Robin.
Hello, Robin.
Hello. I'm not wearing sleeves in the Zendo. It's just so many months of heat. First, sometimes the teachings that stick with me the most that you've offered over the last 15 plus years are those that are your personal story. And I may forget the little facts of the personal story, but what remains with me is an emotional truth that somehow directs me and affirms. And what you offered this morning did that. I knew, because of my role with councils and meeting with you one-on-one for practice discussion over the years since you moved, I had gained a sense of how cataclysmic COVID was for you personally, and the move was. And yet, I feel as time passes, we probably all have a better sense of what we experienced and are more able to express it. And I guess a couple of thoughts that come to mind in no particular order are that this grief, we can't just do it once. Like this talk or this time of getting together or this time of saying, remember when, we'll be doing it. I feel like in some ways, all the movies and books that have been written about World War II, they're just like endless. I feel like COVID will be some version of that we'll just, I remember my grandmother talking about being in quarantine for scarlet fever, and it was very, very scary and disruptive. And to me, it seemed like so silly, quarantine. And so for us to just acknowledge that we'll keep circling this loss, fear, sorrow, change over and over again. And I think what's key is that we allow for that, like, oh, that's coming around again. Okay. And instead of getting stuck in, I want it to be the way it was, whatever, our job life, I want to work at home part of the time, just all, it all comes down to the basic Buddhist teachings of either I want this or I don't want that. And I think what's key in working with our grief about change, whether it's the Appamada changes, COVID changes, or just plain old changes, is that we allow for it, for the grief, for the anger, for the frustration, and the incredible sorrow, and yet not get stuck there in resentment, nostalgia, which just, we know how nostalgia works. It just gets better and better. And to come back to the present, because even on the other side or in the midst of this change, there is new energy and there's new wisdom, and there's the idea that we used to think that meeting on Zoom for just so Vaughn could attend in West Texas, we're like, just get in your car and drive 8 hours. I mean, Jesus Christ. That we get to have these heartfelt relationships with people in New Jersey and Canada and England and Scotland, people that I lived through COVID with, that I probably will never be in the same room with, and who are dear teachers and students and compadres on this path. I guess the other thing I want to say, having been in the leadership group when the changes, when you were moving, is to once again, it literally was a year, and it was a year between the time that Laurie and Todd and Joel were entrusted in person, and we were all like, oh, this entrustment, what a cool idea. And it seemed all kind of theoretical and wonderful. And we were so happy for the three of them. And then for their role to become suddenly very clear, very real. And yet they were living in their own midst of COVID, change, loss, etc. And that, I guess, for the Sangha to know that while none of us in leadership may have done things perfectly, being humans, I'm very proud of how we, all got on Zoom, and I say like a phone. It wasn't a phone. We all got on Zoom and, literally said, well, who wants to take Monday? Well, what about Tuesday? And that we all just did that. And for more than a year, not knowing, was it going to be Tuesday, every Tuesday for like a month, or every Tuesday for 2 years? And if we've done it imperfectly at times, so be it. I'm sure I ask for apologies, or I ask for forgiveness, and I apologize. But unlike some other communities, I feel like we're thriving, and those seeds are very much rooting in the ground. And when it rains later this week, which will be quite an event, they may root and plant. And finally, to say that there are ways to do work practice online, even if they're not for the Sangha. I had work practice during the chaplaincy program online, and it gives me an idea of a talk that I might give when I'm next up, because we do work practice in our homes, and though it's not benefiting the Sangha directly, we can be bringing that practice back to one another, and therefore in our lives, and therefore touching everyone that we touch, which is pretty awesome. And last weekend we had a wonderful, though very hot, outdoor work practice. And so I see the bushes behind where I think Carolyn is sitting. I can't tell who that is because they're too tiny. The outdoors of the Sangha of the Zendo is looking so beautiful. And finally, you are actually going to be in Austin shortly. Mm-hmm. So make sure and mention that for anyone in Austin, because it will be a great opportunity. If you've been thinking, wow, maybe I should get back to the Zendo like old times, it'll be even more like old times.
Thank you, Robin. Yes, I'll be in Austin the 10th to the 17th, and we'll do a Jukai ceremony on that Sunday.
Thank you. We have time for 2 more, Peg, and then we'll have to close the day there. And so we have Mary next.
Hi, Mary.
Hi, Peg. Thank you for your Dharma teachings as always, and thank you. I think today was especially moving for me as you shared your brokenheartedness during that period, and also that sense of aloneness. It's something that I've been practicing with too in terms of grief. And I just, one thing I want to reiterate that you said, just as a possibility of like having a ceremony. You know, we did not, I mean, you named it, we did not get to do a goodbye. We did not have that. And having had sudden loss in my own life recently, the power of that ceremony that I've had with the close group was profound. And you've always talked to me about how rituals are important. And so I wanted to circle back in terms of what I heard in that and what didn't. You know, oftentimes we look at what didn't happen that should have, and we don't come back and redo that. So that's all I wanted to bring forward. And thank you as always for your seeding my life and also teaching the impermanence of the change and how do we go through that. So that's all that I want to say. Appreciate you. And I appreciate the Sangha and everyone here. Thank you.
Now we go back to Austin.
Hi.
Hi. Peg, I really love your Dharma talk. I do hope you will not disregard at least my yearning for story time with Peg and hearing about the book. I loved when you read to us. So I still hope that we can have some of that in the future because it's so lovely to hear what you're working on. And I just want to kind of reiterate a little bit, Robin's right. The present right now is really awesome. And I know there's loss, but there's also plenitude and so many good things happening. And Robin was talking about all of this web across the world that's now opened up to us through Zoom, but I get here as much as I can in the mornings, which is very rarely. And when I do, it is the most sacred, beautiful gift to walk in. The other morning, there was no one to do the clackers, and Kim just handed them to me as soon as I walked in the door. And then sweetly, I think it was you, Joan, came over and was like, here, and handed me the timekeeping. And it was just like what Joel said, the teachings and the embodied presence of my fellow students who are actually my teachers. Both Joan and Kim teach me every time I show up in the morning just by being here together. So there is the magic of Appamada unfolding all the time in my point of view, which is why my question is it possible that because one of your wishes was that we would complain less, is it possible that there's maybe like a negativity bias where we're focusing on the few problems and things that we necessarily need to figure out because of all this upheaval? We're focusing on the kind of the bumpy parts, which are inherent to this transition and expressed by a few people, instead of focusing on the awesomeness that's happening all the time by people like Nate, who are sacrificing so much of his precious time to run the board, and sweet Nino, who makes all of our finances hold together, and it's not easy. So I just see the goodness, and I'm wondering, is it possible that we're letting a few disgruntled complaints weigh too much?
That's a good question. Yeah, that's a really good question. So I am happy to hear that. I'm happy to hear that perspective from you. And I'm grateful for all that you're doing too, Clayton. You have a family, it's a very active family, right? And I know that you have your work. And so it's great when you can join in the morning It's wonderful. And I'm happy to have that reflection about the basic goodness of the Sangha. And I totally endorse that. I totally believe that. And basically what I meant was, it's hard for people to appreciate what's offered. It's easy for people to be dissatisfied. And what my hope is that people will be willing to accept what's offered in the spirit in which it's offered, because every single person is really a volunteer. Every single person is offering what they can. So, and I'm so appreciative that people want to do this together. I mean, this is what we want to do together, right? This is who we want to be together. And I totally support that. And I know each of you supports that. And that's what's so great about being together. Yeah, it's hard to face what we have to face alone. It's just too hard. So thank you so much, Clayton.
Thank you.
And thank you for all your gifts of poetry over the years in the Sangha.
I love it. We're such a blessedly literary bunch, thanks to you and Flint. So thank you.
Okay. All right. Okay, Maria.
Thank you all so much. See you all. Thank you, everyone. Thanks, Maria.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone in the Zendo, in Austin, and the online Zendo.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks, Maria.
Oh, you're welcome.
Thank you all.
Yep.
Take care, everyone.
Thanks. Bye.